just among fun. Military science fiction podcast. Books or stories every Wednesday. Military science fiction podcast. Discussion, interviews, reviews, and rants. Military science fiction podcast.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to the show. Today we have a few things to do because today is launch day for Jeff for the longest battle. So you want to tell us a little bit where are we at in the series? What are we going to get from this
Yeah,
book?
in book 9.
Book 9.
Yeah, it is. It is book 9, and it's over 1,000,000 words now, which is pretty cool. It's like 1,013,000 or 1,031,000, something like that for book 9. So it's averaging more than 100,000 per
Annam.
Per book.
book. Yeah,
Little fried here at the end.
No, I just got distracted because John Walker's Unwanted Starship moved past me for space fleet science fiction, and that annoys
Unwanted
me.
Starship. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's just, man, that whole genre, right? Am I right? Just like,
Who doesn't want a starship?
it's so funny, that whole like backyard starship thing that started, and it's all crazy, man. It's crazy. So book 9, obviously, whenever you're writing a series that's this long, you're gonna have. Damn it! Sorry. You also moved past me, military sci-fi. That's annoying. All right.
Focus, Jeff.
I gotta
Focus.
stop looking. Sorry. I was pulling it up so I could look at the blurb. Whenever you have a book series that runs that long, obviously you're gonna lose readers along the way. There's no book series that maintains this readership 100% from book 1 to book 9, or book 1 to book 6. Usually the steep drop off comes around book 6. So it's especially important that once you hit those long series that you try to keep things original and keep things moving in the right direction. And one of the things I love to do with my books is look at events in history and, in space. I in space everything. What if Horatio Hornblower, or not Horatio Hornblower, what if Horatius at the Bridge was in space? What if the Battle of Leyte Gulf was in space? And obviously it's not one for one. It's just sort of more like an inspiration thing, where like I look at it and go, okay, well, how did this battle form? What caused it? Why did things work the way they work? It's like the Battle of Midway. Was it Midway? No, Coral Reef.
Coral Sea.
The one with the Enterprise when the planes got lost.
Coral Sea.
Coral Sea. There we go. Yeah.
Coral Reef.
I was gonna say, Coral Reef. Yeah. That was a short battle. How did that work? Why did it work the way they work? And then like try to extrapolate that into space. And I did that. With the Battle of Coral Sea is, I think, book 5. There's a battle in the beginning of book 5 that is basically the Battle of Coral Sea. And so with the longest battle, I've always known from the beginning there were two things that were gonna happen in the book. One, there wasn't gonna be a giant major battle to end the war with the Caliph. There just wasn't. This was from the beginning kind of the war in the Pacific, but in space. And 2, the Interceptor was going to be integral into ending the war. But how does a destroyer end a war, with a giant nation in space that would require like a massive fleet? And the whole thing about writing, a destroyer is that they're not important in fleet battles. In Leyte Gulf, they sent destroyers off to do recon missions and to, secure their flanks and things like that. And every time a destroyer got into trouble or ran into the enemy, it was usually by accident. The Fletchers were amazing, but they couldn't go up against cruisers. And so I kind of like took that idea of like, how can the Interceptor be integral to the end of the war? Looked at history, as I do, and came up with the USS Indianapolis, which was vital to ending the war in Japan, in the Pacific. I went on a secret mission that nobody knew about and completed it successfully, and then got sunk. And unfortunately, and anybody who's watched Jaws, you know that story. 1,100 men went in the water, 300 men came out.
We delivered the bomb.
Yeah. And so, I took a lot of inspiration from that, and then I also, I wanted to show more of like we're all in the military. I was never married when I was in the military, though I did have a couple of girlfriends at this time or another, and it's really hard on your family when you're gone. It's really hard on people who love you when you're gone. And sometimes you end up being gone and you don't know how long you're going to be gone. Sometimes you think you're going to be gone for a month and you end up going to be gone for 8 months. I went on a deployment I thought was going to be a week and it ended up being 6 months. And so I wanted to show a lot more of that. Um,
Should have read the
Nadia.
memo, Jeff.
Huh?
You should have read the memo, Jeff.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was a PFC, buddy. I didn't get the memo. I got orders, Mr. Officers.
Memorandum 4.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this book is about 2/3 of the book is the journey from Alexandria and all the stuff that can go wrong with it. And they're in kind of a new ship. It's untested. They have some major advantages over the enemy, but it's not perfect. And so they're still figuring the systems out. There's still flaws, and you know, and yeah. And there's some mysteries involved. There's a couple of mysteries that unfold during the course of the book that are pretty interesting. One of them being who actually gave the caliphate the technology for the collars, because it's not the caliphate, and things like that. So I enjoyed writing the book for the most part. It did take me a little bit longer than normal, but it's book 9. That's to be expected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Rick, you've written a long series. You know how long, how the closer the further away you get from book 1, the kind of more.
I'm on book 14 in my Aeon 14 series. So,
Oh yeah, well you too, Jameson. Yeah,
Yeah.
you absolutely know. I didn't realize you were on book 14 in your Aeon 14 series.
yes, it's coming out in May. Actually, are we in
Oh.
May yet? Yeah.
No,
Isn't
we're not
14
there
the
yet.
last book you can write in an Aeon 14 series?
Maybe. No, I've
Let's
got
make
one
sure
more,
we have a show about it.
one more in this series.
And I brought in all the usual characters who've survived from the previous books and introduced kind of a slew of new ones that I hope people like. I try to. I can't keep the same people from book to book. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense for officers to be the same officers on a ship year in and year out, especially when different deployments and different ships. You can get away with the captain being the same.
We get to keep Jacob, right?
Yeah, oftentimes captains are captains for years. And you can get away with a lot of the NCOs being the same because NCOs have, their ways of making sure they're assigned where they want to be assigned.
They homestead.
I knew a guy who uh, who is it in the army that assigns people to places? I forget what it was, but he told me he was a sergeant first class, and he always went where he wanted to go, and he told me that it was because he sent this one guy in the office. I forget the name of the office. That's a civilian.
Arpersen?
What was it?
Arpersen?
Yeah, I think so. He sent them a case of like 20-year-old malt whiskey every year, and it cost him a couple grand, but he always got the assignments he wanted to get. He got to go to places he wanted to go. And so, NCOs have their ways, and at least good ones. And so, yeah, so I have a lot of the same characters, a lot of the same feelings to the book. It's always, when you're sitting down to read a book about Jacob Graham, there's a couple of things you're gonna expect, and you're gonna get those things. One of them is that he's uncompromising. He's not going to compromise on his morals for anything, and he's going to complete the mission. And how he completes the mission is always the fun part. But so far, it's doing really well. It hit number 1 in military sci-fi this morning, which I'm pretty pleased about. It's 413 in the store overall.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice.
I got 2 5-star reviews and 1 1-star review, which is kind of crazy because it's the first 1-star review I think I've gotten in a while. And I don't argue with reviewers. There's no way to now. I mean, there used to be a way you could comment on it, but I don't think that everybody's entitled to their opinion. And dude's bought all my books to book 9. He is entitled to not be happy with it. I'm sorry he's not happy with it. I wish he was, I don't agree with his review, obviously. When he said it didn't make sense. I think it made sense, but we'll see what everybody else says.
I'd say I'll argue with him. He can go write his own book. He apparently wants to.
Well, they bought your book. I mean, they paid money for your book. That buys them a ticket to leave whatever review they want.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, if he's read all the way through to book 9, then
Yeah,
he's
he's bought
kind
more
of
than one.
earned the right to complain if he wants
Oh,
to.
I know. And this is, I think folks might get a kick out of this review because it's obviously the person's very passionate about it, and it's, I think, a good 10 paragraphs. So it's
Yeah,
not
it's
a,
a
it's not a
long review.
drive-by.
You got to hit
Paragraphs,
see
right?
more there to read the whole review.
It was like 2 paragraphs, and the
Oh,
big
no, it's
thing that
more
I
than
thought
that.
sometimes you look at that stuff and you're like, well, why is he saying this? Well, maybe I wasn't clear enough in my approach
Yeah,
to
that's
what was
that's
going
the
on.
worry I always get is when I see something like that. I'm like, if they don't understand, maybe I didn't make it clear enough.
Because
Yeah.
that's our job, right? Our
Yeah,
job
yeah.
is to explain the story to the readers in a way that they'll find entertaining. I would have thought that if you got into book 9, you would understand that technology in my books is not like technology in the movies where everything just works magically and it never goes wrong and is always infallible. Um, that's just not that's just not how that works. Yeah, they're in a new ship. It's untested. They're in a stealth ship, which is the first stealth ship the Alliance has ever produced. And dude expects it to work perfectly, and also doesn't understand why they send a single ship. And I'm like, there's a whole thing about this. They can't send the fleet in. It's they need them to not know that you were there, kind of thing.
Well, the book
And
launched
so
today or yesterday? Was
yesterday,
it? Yeah. So read in one day. I mean,
yeah, oh yeah,
maybe.
I had a buddy call me this morning. He's like, at 11 p.m., 11 a.m. Central Time. He lives in Eastern Time, and he started the book at 6:30, and he just finished it. And I'm like, okay, clearly I don't write fast enough to keep you in a book every single day. I mean, come on, man. He's like, well, I'll go back and reread it slower a few times. Or you could just read it slow the first time.
I never do that. I never read a book and then go back and reread it immediately. I'll reread a book maybe months later or a year later, but nah, I'm reading the book once. I'm getting all the details I can, and that's it.
I mean, it has to be an extraordinarily good book for me to reread. Like I've reread Ender's Game, I've reread Armor, Starship Troopers, I've reread Dune.
It doesn't
So,
have to be an extraordinarily good book. It just has to be a book that I really enjoy
well,
reading.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Those aren't always the same
Those
thing.
aren't always the same. No, you're right. You are right. There is a book that I reread that it's not particularly well written per se, but it's super fun, and it's called Confessions of a D-List Supervillain, and it is an extraordinarily fun book to read. So I read that one a couple of times. But like, I wrote the book. I'll listen to the audiobook when it comes out, just so I can see how Peter did because he does such a great job, and it's almost like it's almost like I'm listening to a book I didn't write.
Hmm.
But I won't reread my book ever. I can't.
I reread mine sometimes.
I'll reread parts of it, but I mean, like to sit down and read the thing that I wrote. I mean, I remember writing every single word that I've written. So I mean, like I'm reading it. I'm like, I remember writing this
Wait
part.
till you get to 91 books. You won't.
Yeah, no,
I will say that every time I reread something I wrote, I'm typically like, that's better than I thought it was. Like, so that's always my
yes.
incentive to do that.
Like I said, I'll read like tidbits and excerpts and things like that, and almost always I'm like, wow, I'm not bad. Man, to sit down and intentionally reread an entire book. I mean, it's 10 hours to read a book that I wrote. It seems like I got better things to do with my life.
Well, I mean, usually when I do it, I'll be driving all day and I'll just put the audiobook on just because.
Well, yeah, audio is different. I'll listen to the audiobooks, but to read, like to sit down with the
Yeah.
book and reread it. I mean, that's
The only time I read is when I am doing something that reading is the only thing I can do otherwise.
yeah.
I've
And
been,
it's nice is I don't have to reread them as much now that we have Notebook LM and other things where I can kind of like get the information I need without having to go through and reread whole chapters to find out like what
Yeah.
was this guy's name and how was it spelled and where does he appear and
Mhm.
but but yeah, but the longest battle, I wish I could write these books a little bit faster than I have been. It's been a rough couple of years for me in that respect, where I got all the kids, and I've got my wife's father, who was in a lot of ways a lot like a dad to me, passed away 2 years ago, and we moved, and our son went deaf, and it's just it made the last 2 3 years pretty stressful, which is it's hard to be creative when you're stressed out.
Yeah.
And then we had another baby because but she's just so delightful. How could you not want this baby? It's so delightful.
I'm so happy you have that baby.
Yeah, never say never.
Never.
But yeah, it was
I'm
a
ready
lot
for
of fun to
grandkids,
write.
Jeff.
And
I don't want.
what?
So I'm ready for grandkids.
I'm ready for grandkids too. If I could just get any of my children married. Well, any of the ones that are
I have one married,
old
and
enough.
I'm crossing my fingers if I can.
But yeah, it was a great experience to write, and I'm ecstatic that people are buying it the way they are. I'm not sure how many copies I would have had to sell to get to 400, but I think it's a lot.
Mhm.
And hopefully I'll get down to 200 because that's like usually where I get. And yeah, it's been fantastic. So longest battle, check it out on Amazon. The narrator's already recording the audiobook, so it'll be out shortly too. And then the next book is called Grimm's Exile. Spoiler alert. And it'll be out next year around the same time. This time though, it's only taking a year for me to write the book, not because I have so much stuff going on, but because I'm also writing a new series called Endless War that will be out hopefully before then. Questions?
What is 42 times 236?
Where are we in the overall arc? Have you had an idea, or is that just the ongoing conversation with Athon, depending on how things are going?
As you guys know, it is completely dependent on sales.
Yeah.
If they tell me in 6 months that they're like, hey, you know what, only like 400 people pre-ordered Grimm's Exile, so that's gonna have to be the last one, then that's gonna have to be the last one. So as long as people keep pre-ordering and buying it, I'll keep writing them.
So buy the
I
book,
try not to think
pre-order the
about
next book.
I try not to think about like the ending of the book series per
Yeah.
se, because I don't want to fall into this trap of like I try to keep each of the books their own story, so that there are like little pieces that float on from book to book. What happens between Nani and Jacob, and the war of the Caliphate and things like that. But for the most part, the books are the books.
Mhm.
This one is the end of the war with the Caliphate, though, obviously, but that's going to bring a whole host of other challenges, as we all know that what happens when wars end. So
Obviously, the crew of the Interceptor needs to go through a wormhole and end up in like the other side of the galaxy, so we can get some planet-to-planet adventures and Green Women. That's the thing I'm looking forward to.
no aliens.
He needs to go to another universe and meet up with Cam and Vicky.
No aliens, no worm. Well, there are wormholes in the book, but no hopping out of the universes or anything like that.
No
Um,
jumping the
never.
shark.
We could do a fun little crossover if we wanted to, but I don't know how that could be canon. But
Cannons would be involved.
but yeah, I tend to keep the stories grounded and human, and involved in the their world in a way that feels realistic.
Hmm.
I haven't done much with the Terran Republic or the Iron Empire. I want to do more with them. I think I'm all caliphate out. Though I mean, there's obviously going to be things happening with them as they collapse, as that empire collapses, and
Spoiler alert.
People are free, and yeah, spoilers. Sorry.
Here's a suggestion. I know it goes against everything that you've done in your book, but have Jacob promoted and actually, rewarded and given a really nice ship, and then put him in a situation where he has to like sacrifice it or
Rick, that is a fantastic idea. In fact, I think I'm going to go back in time and write that book. It's called Grimm's Legacy. He gets a battleship in the last book. He gets a battleship, and
No.
it's state of the
Sorry, I
art.
haven't read that one.
Yeah, it's all right.
He
And
gets a sweet gig as a
but
contractor, and he
spoiler
has to
alert,
go.
at the end, you know, you know, it's why the next one's called Crim's Exile. But no, that's a great idea. I'm glad you thought of it. Glad I
You get a
thought
Glad
of
I
great
thought
scene of
of
Jacob sitting in an apartment, drinking a beer with his like rubbing his belly, thinking about all the money he's making from being a contractor, and
it.
then he gets a
What
phone
I'm gonna do
call.
is I'm gonna start a book off with him being super depressed, and then everybody's just depressed throughout the whole book.
That sounds
And then
great.
at the end of the book, it shows that he's worthless and he should never have been there in the first place. That's what I'll do. And then they'll make that into the movie.
That sounds
it.
awesome.
That's every movie recently.
Can't
It seems like
can't wait to read that.
let's
Please take
let's open with Gray and have our heroes depressed and questioning why they should be heroes and how worthless they are, and no more depressed heroes.
The
Please.
idea about the contract, I mean, it was a joke, but the contractor thing got me thinking.
Oh no.
Like, he's a contractor, but it's really an undercover intelligence operation. You know?
Yeah,
Something Nadia could do. It's an
he's like
espionage situation.
he's
Well, yeah,
going undercover.
she'd be his handler, telling him what to do, and he's like trying to infiltrate maybe this this military contractor that has armed ships or something that's planning a coup.
It's not a bad idea. I like that. I like the idea of him trying to be a spy because he's so earnest and straightforward and plain spoken.
That would be the result of his exile. He will that'll be like now everybody's going to think you're embittered and you don't have any.
It's the perfect cover.
Yeah. There you go.
I had a segue with something we were talking about earlier, and then I lost it. But
Censors.
after maybe it was the stealth, the fact that there's the new
Yeah,
stealth
ship.
but a question came up in the Discord about sensors and how we
I don't
use
believe
them.
in censorship, so
I know. And then Doug, who is one of our resident experts, gave a very thorough explanation of about basically passive versus active sensors, thinking about heat and thermals in space, thinking about shunting heat, and actually how far away you can see things in space that a lot of people don't, think about a lot, depending on the type of drive you have. But as I think about sensors, like really it comes down to, for me, like information flow, like how are you giving information? What does the character see as they progress through the story, and tension, right? Because a sensor is a mechanism in a MLSF story you can use to either show the characters things or don't show them things, or increase tension about what they might see. And so I thought that might be a thing we could talk about. Like how do you think about information flow, and how fast, or which maybe is also a pacing question. And then tying it back to MLSF, like how do sensors or tech, or how does that play into it as you're thinking about things? So maybe I'm really twisting all this up, but that's immediately where my mind went in all these different, as I was thinking through these different pieces.
It's sensors in space are really interesting. You call them sensors, but the like in Star Trek, they're always like, oh, full power to the sensors, or like what are those sensors? What are they like? What beams are you shooting out? In space, you've got radar, lidar, and whatever your passive picks up. In gravity, obviously, if you've got some kind of gravity sensor. I have not come up with or seen anybody come up with a new way of looking at things in space that works
isn't our
better
jobs
than.
as authors to come up with a new way of looking at things?
Yeah, it is, which is why lidar exists, and
I mean,
which is
straight up
why
optics just keep getting better and better. So that's
which is
a
why
thing too.
which is why we have gravity detecting lasers, and why we have thermal and FLIR and optics. The one thing that I have on the interceptor that a lot surprised a lot of people is there's telescopes in the front of the ship.
Of course.
And
Got to be optical.
yeah, you got to have optics. And
Also, speaking of coming up with new ways, that's one thing I really like about using a Alcubierre style star drive in a couple different series I have. Because if you can warp space to the extent that you would have to make it that kind of a drive, if you can mold the very fabric of space-time, well, then you can mold it into a lens They'll let you
Hmm.
see farther.
That's
And
true.
if you're as in my LQB style drives, if you're using some sort of I call it gravimetric. That's just like a shorthand term, but it's a link between gravity and electromagnetism that's in another spectrum, another dimension. Because it's all we have no idea how this would work, so I'm just making it up. I'm taking this as one of the givens, like the few things of hand wavium that we have this technology that we can make this distortion in space. Well, if you can make that distortion in space, then you can take that same field you're using to distort space and you can shoot it out like a beam and detect the effects of the beam, just like you do with a
Hmm.
laser. So that's long range sensors is you're shooting something that that makes fluctuations in space time and you detect what they hit. So
I like it.
that's like
Yeah,
that's
and
that's the only kind of sensor like I invent for my books is if you have that kind of technology, then you can use it like a laser or electromagnetic wave like in radar and figure out what it hits and how it
if you
interferes with it.
if you back all the way up and think about humans as meat mechs interpreting signals from outside our optical sensors, like what is the sensor giving you, right? Is it giving you thermals? Is it giving you gravity distortions? Is it giving you color gradients? Like think about the ways that we classify planets, that we do based on you know what the optics look like of the planet, the colors, if we can figure out chemical or different.
Mostly it's infrared. They
Yeah.
look what is
And
reflecting off of it.
and right now, even in the newly developed optical sights for rifles in the military,
Hmm.
we can take infrared and thermal and other things and put them together into a computer simulated image. So at this point, you're going to have a computer that gives you the simplest image, making like I can't think of the word, like an amalgam, I guess,
Right.
of all that sensor information. Is just going to put it in a picture for you that you can understand in as little time as possible.
And if you corrupt that, then that I don't know, that opens
That's
up all kinds of
true.
interesting things too. You could do with
You could use AI for it, and then when you blow up
exactly.
the civilian liner, the AI could be like, "Oh, you're right. That wasn't a military ship. Here's
Sorry.
how you identify a military ship."
The reason I went to information flow to start with is because I think if you have perfect sensors, you've got just not a very interesting story. Like imperfect information about the character's, scene setting is what makes things interesting, right? So if
Well, I
you're
mean,
moving into a battle and you've got perfect knowledge about the battle space, like that's like okay, you could react to that. But part of what I think it increases everything, all the tension in the story is not knowing exactly what is out there. And
See, I don't know if I disagree. I don't know if I'd agree totally because just because you can see something doesn't mean you can affect it. And it may
Mhm,
be more tense to know there's enemy over here that you really, really have to get to and you can't, or it's going to take hours to get to them.
mhm. Well,
And
and that
they're
there's a
doing
lot of
something over
tension there,
here.
but I mean, that's part of the problem of actual space travel, right? Is if it's going to take us 13 hours to get somewhere, we got to jump through that or something. But that's a
well,
good point.
it is a good point, and also like, when do you have perfect anything?
Hmm.
Especially with the military. I mean, like, when you have a lot of interpreting radar signals and sonar signals and things like that are left to the operator. Your computer can do a lot to tell you what it could be, but computers aren't perfect, as we know, and neither is AI. And so you a lot of times you're left with, okay, well, this signal looks a lot like this signal, and this signal was a P-17,
Hmm.
or whatever. And it's where it comes down to having like a really, skilled technician at the hand, to interpret those things. Because I feel like if you left it up to the computer would just always take like the simplest approach. I know, I don't know if this happened in the real world, but there were simulations where they turned the Patriots to full computer controlled, and they end up shooting down a lot of American jets. So you
Hasn't
don't
happened in
want.
the real
And
world
that's
yet, but in simulation, I mean, there's an auto fire function, and there's a lot of, how much the computer makes a decision versus how much the person makes a decision. And I mean, that's what we're living through right now, right? Like it always I can't remember where the axiom came from. I think from IBM that a computer should never make a decision because a computer cannot be held accountable. But now we're absolutely living through a time where people are letting the computer make the decision and then trying to blame the computer because it was the one that made the targeting list. And then a human just said, okay, do it.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I know we're living in that time. We're kind of watching all those things play out. Like it's one thing to be in science fiction and say like, this is the ironclad rule. We will never break this. And now we're in a time where, yeah, we cut that position. So I guess the AI, just have the AI do it. And then we see what happens, right?
Yeah, right. And then you get the AI screwing up and people die.
I
Yep.
I think that you're right in a realistic sense. I don't personally try to deal with that kind of thing too often
Hmm.
because most of my characters have enough complications in the story without adding that one.
Yeah.
uh, I don't know. I just it feels like it'd be very realistic and maybe it'd be interesting to have them deal with that, but it would probably require me to devote a portion of the plot to just that rather than having it just be an aside. Because if it's just an aside, then it really probably doesn't make enough of what could be an incredibly big problem for them. I mean, if
Hmm.
your sensors are telling you the wrong thing, that's like a whole book or half a book of how the heck do we fight anybody if our sensors are telling us the wrong thing. And I'm not sure it's a half a book I want to write or not.
Well, when I'm writing, I have a lot of different POVs, and one of them is a gravity tech who is really good at what he does, and he can pick signals out of the noise. And it's supposed to kind of mimic sonar because it does. I mean, like gravity waves pass through lasers and that at a certain rate, and that causes a frequency which is translated into a sound. The But interpreting what those are and where things are coming from and all that other stuff is it adds tension to the story and it makes it fun
Hmm.
and exciting and like did they get it right? Is it more than they thought? Have they detected that shit?
And when you think about how you build your characters, like I think it's fun to have that technician who understands a thing but is so egg-headed about it that they can't communicate it. And then one of the functions of the captain or some other characters that stand in for the reader could be like, well, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. Can you explain that again? Okay, captain. Well, it's like blah 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 blah, and then that's a way to explain that to the reader so that they get like, and then also you can have the technician explain the ways that it can break or not work and have that come back in later as the captain is trying to figure that out or navigate it or and so that how that information goes back and forth I think is we get back to okay what is this is I think the transition I was trying to think of what the reader understands or doesn't understand and ways that you can try and make that more clear to them is you if you have a really important piece of the story like how sensors work or how the enemy is going to be revealed using characters to explain that is a way that you can hopefully get the reader to pick up on what you were trying to lay down when it comes to how these things work and what the vulnerabilities are to something. And so how you dole that information out, I think, is a really important thing to think about. Oh, you're muted, Jeff.
No, no, I was
Oh.
telling my kids to stop yelling. The Yeah, no, for sure. And as you know, Bob is a great tool for
Hmm.
conveying information to the readers for sure.
Is it? Because I always thought it was a horrible
It's
tool.
a horrible way to do
As
it. There
long
are
as you
good
don't
ways and
say
bad
as you
ways,
know,
but yeah,
Bob, or
yeah.
as you know, Captain.
Don't ever say
Yeah,
that.
don't say as you know, because if he knows, then you don't need to tell him.
Yeah,
I
there are
Usually
subtle
I
ways to do
reserve that. I reserve that for things that I can't reasonably expect the reader to know or the captain to know. Like in book two, they run into this very rare stellar phenomenon called the dark star, which is a star that emits no light. And you know, he's really frustrated on the bridge because everybody seems to know what it is but him. And he's like, if somebody doesn't explain this, I'm gonna throw people out the lock. Somebody tell me what's going on here. And so in those instances, it's a great tool for that to have somebody else explain it. And you kind of want to subvert it, right? Don't have like the engineer explain an engineering thing. Have somebody else from out of the blue be like, well, it is, and they give you some textbook definition, like, how the hell do you know that? You're like, I read a lot, that kind of thing. Give me a lot of fun.
hmm Another thing about sensors that a lot of people don't think about is if you can see them, they can see you. And
Active sensors.
active sensors. And so think about, but even like negative sensors, like the thing Rick was just talking about, like if you've got a, why is there so much activity in this location and nothing here? Or, what are, if you're taking in the whole scope of the information that's available across the area of space they're in or something they expect to see, it maybe it's not an actual sensor, but it's just information about what's happening that's different than what was there before, and that can lead the characters to look at
I mean,
that.
depending on what kind of a drive you're using, you're going to be revealing yourself just by being there.
Yeah.
In none of my books is there anything approaching stealth for a starship, because I mean you're either blasting this big fusion ball of energy out behind you, which is going to be very visible on thermal, or if you have some kind of a drive that uses space-time distortion, well, you're distorting space-time, and that's going to be visible from the light behind you, and there's going to be specialized algorithms in your ship's optical cameras that are going to look for just that kind of thing. So basically, everybody's going to know you're there.
The fusion drive thing,
unless
though,
you jump out of some sort of hyperspace close to where you're going to be hitting, that's the only way nobody's going to know you're there.
the fusion drive thing, though, like if you're running a fusion torch, the only people who are going to see that are people who are at a 180-degree angle and behind you. Nobody in front of you is going to see you.
It's going to be more difficult to
All the
see.
light
It's
heat
not
is going to be
impossible.
going away, and from opposite of
I
them,
mean,
not toward
if
them.
you're running a fusion torch, you're going to have to be decelerating at some point too.
Well, yeah, when you start decelerating, yeah, they'll see you.
And that's going to be halfway to where you're going.
I've had in like book 2 or book 3, I forget what it was. There was one of the enemy organizations, the guild, the terraforming guild, had an actual true stealth ship. Like nobody could detect it, and they used it to bomb Alexandria. And I kind of kept that, what made that technology work, like secret. Like I didn't explain it because the guild had a lot of advanced technology that I didn't explain. They used the Dyson swarm to power their planet, that kind of thing. And so in this book, when the Alliance kind of reverse engineered what they could, they came up with how modern day stealth works is the combination of materials and paint, right?
Vent black.
Yeah.
They have special materials the aircraft is made out of, and then they have a special paint. The aircraft has to be repainted almost every single time it flies. And the paint is radar absorbent. And so I kind of took that idea and I thought, like, well, how could you couldn't really do that with a spaceship because you can't repaint it, every day. Because that's what
you can't conceal your thermal signature if you have any kind of a reactor on your ship, though.
Well, you can temporarily using heat sinks. You absolutely can temporarily.
But eventually they have to.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Therein lies the tension, right? So the interceptor has heat sinks, and all the heat is pumped using sumps into these heat sinks. But eventually, those heat sinks become full, and they have to be ejected, and then they shine like a star on thermal. So there's ways to do it temporarily, and that's kind of what the stealth is in the new book is. It's temporarily. They have a limited number of uses where they can basically coat the ship in nanites that have that radar absorbing nanites that coat the ship. But as the ship travels through space, just the actual act of traveling through space, those get degraded and worn out, and you can only do it so many times because you can only carry so much of that stuff. And on top of their regular thermal, heat sinks and radar absorbent stuff and active jamming and scamming, or active scanning, or active jamming. Active jamming, but there's a new kind of like there's a way to jam people without them necessarily knowing that they're being jammed, which I find is really interesting, which is you're broadcasting on a frequency that is neutralizes their broadcasts but doesn't override it.
How does that work?
It's how your sound dampening headphones work. They're not muting the sound, they're neutralizing the sound. So I sort of took that idea and extrapolated it to.
Aren't they directing that towards your ears, not towards the sound?
Well, so if you notice, there's a microphone in the outside of your sound dampening headphones.
Yeah.
And that's as the sound comes in, the stuff inside the headphones broadcasts the sound out.
But that's doing that to affect sound in the direction of your ear.
Yes,
It's not jamming the sound at its
Well,
source,
hence
which
the
is what
hence the science fiction part of it. I sort of extrapolated that to like a localized area. So as the signals come in, they would be neutralized, not necessarily at the source, but as they hit the interceptor. So I think that's probably what that guy was complaining about. He's like, why did you just have a cloaking device that limited the weapons fire and stuff like that? I'm like, well, because this is not Star Trek. They don't have magical cloaking fields. There's no invisibility field. Ships are incredibly hard to spot with the naked eye in space. I mean, like you get 100 miles away, you're not seeing it. It doesn't, you're just not. Um, you
maybe in
have to
your
have sensors. You have to have radar,
I think you got to
thermal.
determine that. Like, are they or are they not in this world? So just
I mean, yeah, I'm just saying if you have a drive that will take you to relativistic speeds, even for short periods of time, that's just going to put out a lot of energy. That's going to be
Oh yeah.
visible. And I mean, even if it's something that would currently, it would take us a long time to spot in that kind of a universe where we have starships and we would have things dedicated to just detecting that kind of
Well,
distortion or
yeah, but space is big.
yeah,
Space is very big.
but if you're looking for stuff that's just close to you, you can.
Yes, but
well,
close is relative. At
that's all
what
part
point
of
is
the how the
close
information
too
reaches the
close?
characters, right? Like,
Yeah.
are you looking at a certain piece of space? Are you looking
Like
at
we're looking at the sky trying to stop
yeah.
asteroids from hitting us, and they still spot asteroids like 500,000 miles away, and like, wow, that one's
How
kind of
much energy do
close,
you have to do this?
It's all yeah. It's also because we don't have the kind of technology you're talking about in that future where we don't. If we had even the technology we could have, if we're willing to spend money on it right now, we
Mhm.
could have a series of satellites pass the orbit of the moon. You could have hundreds of them just looking for that kind of thing, and we'd have a really good view of the asteroids, that are heading our way. But we don't have the money to spend on that, so that's the main reason we can't spot them that quickly.
Well, I mean, and it stands the reason we're not gonna have the money to spend on that kind of thing in the future either. I mean, it's all there's a cost and return for stuff, right?
Oh yeah, what my point though is if you have an interstellar civilization already, which means you can get stuff to orbit cheaply. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in that position. And if you can get to other star systems, that means you can utilize the resources of your own star system to a great extent. So they can build things that they can build things a lot more cheaply than we would be able to build them now because they're already out there and they already have, they have infrastructure.
Mhm.
Yeah, but we're talking about ships though. Like
Yeah.
one ship detecting another ship.
Well,
You can't have
Oh, well,
infinite
yeah,
resources on a
I
ship.
thought you meant it was just hard in general to detect ships,
It is
like
hard
from
in
a
general to
planet.
detect ships.
From
but
a
if you
planet.
set up a
Space is
scenario with
big.
a Kuiper belt or with planetoids where you could have
I
sensor
mean,
systems
you
Yeah,
could
I mean,
around,
have.
if you're far away, if you're out in the Oort cloud or the Kuiper belt with a bunch of other tumbling objects, then maybe it'd be really hard to detect a ship in there.
I don't think you'd be able to detect a ship more than a few million miles away, no matter how many sensors you had out there, because inverse square law, radar is useless after a certain point. LiDAR is useless after a certain point. You have to rely on the
Passive
thermal
sensors of
imaging
what yeah, if you,
and visual, and
yeah,
you can't visually scan the entire sky. It's I don't want to say
you can get there with
impossible.
enough time.
yeah, I
I
would
mean,
say you
once we
can. I mean, if you have a computer like an AI computer, maybe a real one in the future.
Oh, you're right.
It's
That was a civilian lighter. I'm sorry.
well, no, if it's just dedicated to doing nothing but detecting spaceships, and it has enough sensors, it could probably detect things a lot farther away than we can now.
but you could put that behind a paywall and you can only get it if you subscribe to their
I think we're
service.
talking military here.
Well,
Well, one person owns the channel to that information.
Well, then
And
the
they don't like
government
you.
be paying, not you.
I think I've detected a ship, Captain. Well, what kind of ship is it? I don't know. They want my credit card
I know. We're
information.
not subscribed to that service. Sorry.
Hmm.
They told you it's there, but they're not going to give you the info.
Well,
So
that is a more dystopian future.
No, yeah. But I always try to do a good balance of like what is the realistic resources and what is the what is the realistic approach to this, right? Like of course, in a perfect future where you have unlimited resources and unlimited technology, you can do all these things. But when you
It's
tell us
not as much
stories are
the
told in the limitations, not the lack
it's
of it.
not so much the unlimited. It's like if you want to get say you're in a system, you're in a universe where you have to use the Alcubierre style star drive. If you want to get from the outer system to the inner system, there's ways to do it without being detected, but they're going to involve you turning off all non-essential power and drifting in, and it's going to take weeks or months, which may make the story, too hard to tell. You're muted, Jeff.
Sorry, I've done that too, where it's like they get up to speed and then they turn everything off, they run silent,
Mm-hmm.
and
They run silent and run deep.
yeah. Well, I tell people if you like that movie, you're gonna like my books. But and yeah, once the ship's off, once everything is secured and there's no or limited radiation, you're not seeing it. You're just in short of extraordinarily bad luck, and you run like right in front of a telescope that has the right resolution, is pointing in the right direction. I just, I've always run off the situation like we live on Earth, we have masters of our oceans, and you still can't detect submarines. We live on Earth, and there are planes that can fly overhead in the broad daylight that you can't see. Stands to reason why you're going to have some of that in space too.
Well, yeah, I'm. That's what I was saying. You can do it as long as you're willing to take a long time to get there. But I mean, like I said, for story purposes, it may be that you can't wait for them to take weeks or months to get to a place unless you're willing to sacrifice that long of a section of your characters' lives.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Uh, I think sensors. I think a lot of what in like movies, TV, and science fiction books is done with sensors in an actual, I don't want to say real, but kind of a future with verisimilitude. Like I said, there's going to be dedicated computer systems that are going to compare all this information. Things like if you see a motion in one part of the sky and you're like, oh, that might be an asteroid, there's going to be something that's going to compare all the previous sightings of asteroids and run
Mm-hmm.
simulations and give you odds that this is a natural object or an artificial one, a spaceship. And I think it's going to be really, really difficult to fool those systems, especially if you're trying to come into an occupied system where there's a civilization. I think there's going to be a lot of surveillance. I mean, if you're a ship,
Well, yeah, but you come
if,
in from the opposite side of the sun, or you come in from behind a planet, or you come in way off the ecliptic. I mean,
yeah,
there's
way off the
trillions upon
ecliptic is the
trillions
best way
upon
to do it.
trillions of,
Way off
of
the ecliptic is the best
tumors.
way to do it, and I use that because people just don't look there. But I mean, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be something that, especially if you're at war already. If you're not at war, you might be able to sneak up on somebody easily. But if you're at war already, they might be looking for things like that.
Yeah, I think having some sort of foolproof detection system in a star system, something the size of a star system, is beyond the technology that I write. That's
Well, it's just
borderline
not that
magical.
interesting. I mean, I think you're right, Rick. And then the countermeasure is going to be like, how do we attack the AI controlling it? Or, but I think to make an interesting story, what Jeff's saying is the thing you got to think about. Like, what are the human elements you could put in this to? We've all seen like nothing is perfect. So how do we make it interesting to the story?
You
And
send you,
So you could
you
have
send in
it
you
could be
send
really
in
interesting
guys
if
and
the
go ahead.
if there was like a star system that was like that, and the interesting part could be like, how do we crack that nut? You
Mhm.
know, how do
Well,
we
that's
how do
when
we
you
get in
send
there?
in the glory boys in little transfer pods that are stealthed up with ablative material, and they go down there and they actually physically take out the sensors.
Or you go to the Kuiper Belt and you push one of those rocks toward the planet,
Yeah, that ain't gonna work.
put a fusion drive on it, get it up to speed, and turn it
Paint it
off.
Vanna Black.
One of the first things that a civilization like that's gonna have is asteroid defenses.
Maybe they didn't pay their subscription fee and they can't run the asteroid defenses.
Okay, that's a Scott Moon book right there.
Yeah.
He likes the dystopian.
Not a book I'd
futures.
write, but yeah.
But also, I remember watching on there's this YouTube channel where he does like writing mistakes, or whatever. He's really funny, and he'll do like these little animated cartoons. And one of the things was he was talking about that he was upset about when he read in a book was like people hiding behind moons and asteroid belts using the geography of the system. But there is a geography to systems. There are moons and asteroid belts. Now, in movies, the asteroid belts are always like these like dense Star Wars-esque asteroid belts, but in reality, that's not how the asteroid belt is at all. I mean, the asteroids are dozens, if not hundreds of miles apart, but they're still there.
I mean,
They're
the way I get
still
around that is I like to write scenes in like the remnants of a space battle, so I can still get like things close to each other and spinning all over the place, but it's not
well,
an
there's
asteroid.
still astrological phenomenon. Like I have a book where there is an asteroid belt. It's not a dense asteroid belt. It's kind of like ours, but the asteroids are all they're all made of a certain kind of magnetic material that basically neutralizes radar. And so you go into it and you can't see. You can't detect anything very far out because the radar, the asteroids all interfere with the radar. So there's lots of cool little things you can do like that, like geographically, so to speak. You can get pulsar where you can't go certain places in the system where you'll get fried.
Hmm.
You can have super planets that have super high gravity, so you can't go near them. You have to like kind of weave your way around them, that kind of thing. It can be a lot of fun. I always try to do something neat, astronomically speaking, in the books because I like the exploration aspect of it. Um, if I could figure out how to write a book about exploration that sold, I probably would. But that's beyond my skill at the moment.
Someday.
I don't know if it's beyond your skill. Maybe it's beyond. Maybe you just don't want to devote the time to away from the things that make money to do that.
But yes, there's that too. I mean, I would need some time to make it work. It took me 2 years to write the first 3 books of Against All Odds because I needed time to
Oh, yeah.
make it all
That's
work.
like me and
I don't have
the
2
epic.
years.
That's like me and the epic fantasy. I'd have to get all into the mindset. It would take time. It would take months for me to get started on that. Just
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
afford it.
Someday.
Maybe if any of y'all want to do a nice Patreon and Kickstarter for me to allow me to live until I can get it started, I'm up for that.
He just needs about $900,000 for a year, and you're
I
good to
know.
go.
Yeah, come on, guys. When do you should be able to do this for me?
How it worked in the past. I need a patron.
Yeah, there you go.
I had a Patreon account at one time, but man, I only got like a handful of people. This is before I did military sci-fi. It was back when I was doing superheroes,
Hmm.
and I got a handful of people who were donating to it. But the amount of work, it's surprising the amount of work it requires to do, because all of a sudden you are beholden to writing a short story every single month or week or whatever schedule you set up. And man, I hated it. I hated it. It's like doing a newsletter. I did not want to do it. So finally, I was just like, you know what? This is a failed experiment. I'm all done. I've decided I do not like doing this.
I think what other sensor things like we didn't really get into personal sensors, but it's sort of the same idea. Like
Well, on a
constrained by
planet,
energy.
you've got like ultrasonics, you've got
Yeah.
thermals, infrared, that kind of thing. To some degree, kind of make radar work for people. Um, Obviously, you can have light sensors, that works on in the atmosphere.
I love
Motion,
the stuff that we're doing with like Wi-Fi, using Wi-Fi signals to determine who's in a house, like using an
yes.
alternate, like a thing you don't expect to be a sensor that could be used as a sensor. Like maybe that's just the nerd in
I
me, but I
hate
find that
that.
really interesting.
I
Acoustics.
so hate that. I
Yeah.
But
mean, like,
that's the thing about like a lot of TV shows and movies. They somehow their sensors like we have life signs on the ship. How do you have life signs? Does life give off some sort of weird? And no, the life signs have faded. What is it giving off? Are you reading heartbeats through a ship through thousands of miles of space? And how does that work?
I've always wondered about that too when they talk about life science because it's like that doesn't make a lot of sense. It would have to be like thermal or something. You're detecting thermal radiation of people moving around. But as you know, Bob, you can't detect thermal radiation through a wall. So
I mean, even if you can detect it through maybe you could detect it through the wall of an Apollo capsule. We're talking about a starship with has to have a
armor,
hull a meter
Signatures,
thick
yeah.
at least, maybe
yeah,
more, or it has some kind of a shield to protect
or
it.
there's
Neither one is going to
heat
let
on
the
the
thermal
hull.
signature of a human body get through it.
Yeah, you're not detecting life signs on a ship. Once you're on the ship, you could. I do like there are motion detectors that detect the movement of air ahead of you. So like if
Yeah.
there's if somebody's walking around nearby, there'll be some air current flows that they can detect.
And that's
Um,
the other thing that bugs me sometimes. Not all shows, not all movies, but a lot of them, they have people doing things secretly on board a ship. I'm like, if you
are there
look
no
at all the
cameras?
cameras around everywhere we are today on a ship, a starship, a military starship, there's going to be cameras and detectors everywhere. And you're
Yeah.
going to have probably some kind of chip implanted in you so they know where you are at all times. Because if you want head to the airlock and try to cycle yourself out, they want to know. So you ain't getting away with nothing on a ship unless you actively sabotage the systems that would detect you. That's the only way you could do it.
I had I think book four there was a fire in the galley and the person who was investigating it kind of showed that they had complete holographic recreation of the event up into the fire before the fire destroyed the equipment that was recording it. Um, but I also mentioned that
You're on
I also
mute.
mentioned that they don't have that. Nobody reviews it unless something happens because nobody operates well when they're being watched 24/7, which is an actual psychological phenomenon where they put cameras on people when they after a few days their productivity goes way down.
Um, but getting back to the whole life science things, I think maybe it would be possible from orbit to detect life signs on a planet because there would be things like thermal signatures of power or fires or something
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
you detect EM fields coming off
Yeah.
if they had radio or or reactors of any kind.
Yeah. But
You could
I,
go look out the window, like, hey, there's a city right there with all those lights.
yeah. But yeah,
Well,
that always bugged me that you could say, oh, there's three life signs on that ship.
Yeah, that
yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
I mean, it gets back to what are you tracking with the sensor? And maybe an alien sees all the light. Like it's simplistic, I guess, but I love like spider-based aliens or sonic, aliens that use acoustics and don't use optics like we do. So
Sonic
the
the
planet could
Hedgehog
be covered
alien.
in a thing that they just don't see, you know?
Rocky,
Yeah.
amaze, amaze,
Maze,
amaze.
a maze.
I love that character. I love that idea. Would never ever actually go to space ever. How would they go to space?
Especially not understanding radiation or relativity.
I mean, they could plot the course, but I mean, like, how would they even know there was space? As far
Yeah.
as they knew, there'd be nothing up there. There wouldn't even be an up there.
There's no there there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They wouldn't build
Adrian
a rocket that would
Tchaikovsky.
launch up into there because, there's nothing there to
Have you
launch
guys
up
read
into.
Children of Time? Like he did it with spiders. But the spiders aren't aware of space. You're right. Like they see things three-dimensionally because that's how they operate. So they don't have a concept. Like he had the spiders are controlling ants, and there was a satellite, and the ants managed to pick up a signal from the satellite, but they don't know where it's coming from. They just know that the signal comes from somewhere. And he did a bunch of wild stuff in that book, like that the spiders farm the ants to create like a biological computer and all this crazy pheromone based stuff that, you have to suspend your disbelief. But I think it gets back to like, what does a sensor give you? Like, what is it? We're constrained by the things that we can observe. And I, I find it interesting when somebody comes up with something that's different in a certain way. If it's going to be the negative, like the AI sees all these things, we have this history of all this stuff. Well, then the sensor becomes a thing that breaks the pattern that's different than what the AI is conjecturing, or I don't know. I find that kind of stuff I love to see when people think about it that way. But you still have to break your sense of belief in it, certain ways that maybe it just won't work, but it's interesting to think about.
So what's funny is the one thing I thought we would be using AI for, which is pattern recognition,
Hmm.
it's almost useless at. It's
I don't
just
know if it's useless.
no, the AI is. Neural nets aren't. The neural nets work great for pattern recognition, and they're going to do a lot of great things with that. But the AI, you can show it the same thing 16 times in a row, 1,000 times in a row, and it'll give you a different answer every single time. Just it's why they can't do math. The probability of what this is. What is the probability of what this is? And they don't, for whatever reason, don't reference what they've already seen. They just reference the probability of what something is,
Or
and
it
then they tell you.
uses so many tokens. I've I've been using Claude, and I'll burn through. I'm just trying to make a fish aquarium Tamagotchi thing for my daughter, and it burns through like I did had it write one piece of code, and it burned through the entire like token allocation for what I had for the 3 hour increment. And how are people doing this full like as a real job? I don't.
There's a
I'm,
Claude. I have a buddy who's a programmer for a bank, and they have like a Claude Enterprise account.
yeah.
And he says his job went from programming to reviewing the code that Claude writes and
Oh
fixing
yeah.
it.
That's the thing. I'm not a programmer, so I just like, hey, you did this
He
thing
says
five
it's
times and it
almost
didn't work.
intentional in the way they do it because he'll
Yep.
have Claude write something that should be 3 lines and it'll come
Hmm.
back with 3 pages.
Yeah, I
And
believe that.
it's like, you can do that in 3 lines. It would be quicker for me just to write it than it would be for me to write the prompt, but they're making him use it. So,
Well, and me as the human, I'm like, you've done the same thing 3 times or 5 times at this point, and it doesn't work. Are you going to do something different? Oh, okay. Ah,
it needs to give you the exact same thing.
yeah. So what other sensors are we thinking about? Like, what about emotional sensors? No, that's not like, I mean, if you wanted to get into some kind of magic type stuff, like people that I'm trying to think of stories that have had things like that. Like Deanna Troy basically is like the hand wavium,
Psychic sensor.
Captain, I feel the emotions of the alien, but that gives you the opportunity in the story to do something wacky that isn't going to fit into, hard SF.
It's afraid.
Right.
Well, I mean, okay, so alpha waves. You
Hmm.
could have a system that detects alpha wavelengths in someone's brain and use that to determine, because alpha waves are very indicative of what we're thinking and what we're feeling and all that stuff. So theoretically, you could have. I wrote a story once where somebody used mind control and they mind control people by controlling their alpha waves. And you could theoretically have something like that that was based in science. But you're getting back to like really fine manipulation of electromagnetic waves on a way that is not even remotely possible at the moment.
Hmm.
I mean, talking about adjusting people's wavelengths, frequencies in their brain, inside their brains. I mean, it's just we can barely detect that with sensors wrapped around their head. So
I was going to say that's the thing. You need some kind of currently, but you get back to how much energy you need to run that sensor if you're doing it remotely and the life signs.
And
So
how detectable it would be by
yeah,
somebody else if they're
you're going
looking
to
for
cook
it.
them all as you try to
yeah,
scan
I
them.
was going to say that. Like I'm going to scan their head. Whoops.
Sorry, we burned them all up. We popped their
Uh,
heads like popcorn.
well, on that lovely note,
We need to go.
what
Yep.
kind of sensors do you guys use? What are you looking for when you're reading a book about that has any kind of active or passive sensors in it? What is your go-to, so to speak, on the sensors? And also don't forget to like and subscribe and share.
Yep.
We need
Do
those. We need those shares. We got to make a living
What,
somehow.
what facts have you detected about your sensors?
it.
I sense.
Hmm.
I sense that you're going to like and subscribe and share. All right. Wait, thanks for hanging out with us, and we will see you next time, all right?
Go buy Jeff's book.
Yep. Go
Yes,
buy
go buy
Joe's
my
book
book.
and leave a review.
A
All
good
right.
review.
Yep. Take
Yeah,
it
five
easy.
star.
7 stars.